conversation with Charles Pachter, the iconic Canadian painter. And we are in his studio in the heart of Toronto. And you're going to see that the view we have from here is absolutely extraordinary. So I'm going to turn the camera to introduce Charles and also to show you that incredible view. Charles, thank you so much for having us. It's
Pleasure.
Fantastic.
Welcome.
So this is your extraordinary place, and looking at the view here, we can see that the skyline is amazing. How did you come about this place? And
well, this is something of a project of a lifetime. I've lived in the neighborhood for over 40 years, right in the very heart of Toronto, 100 meters from the Art Gallery of Ontario and just across Grange Park from the Ontario College of Art and Design University. So here I am in what was still a somewhat rundown neighborhood in the heart of the city. Get this project through the red tape at City Hall with the Committee of Adjustment and the neighbors having to sign away to agree to it and everything else. But the end result is that it's my new museum. It's a 3-story building right in the very heart of town again. And it's been just a joy to be able to complete it and to welcome guests to come and see my work over the last 60 years. It's quite something.
So here we are on the top floor.
This is the 3rd floor terrace. There are altogether 4 terraces. If you can see where I'm pointing in front of me, that little area there, that is the pop-up of the front building where you came in. You may want to take a picture of that from the street.
Yeah.
But this goes over for 2 lots.
Right.
It's L-shaped. In the front, it's only 18 feet. In the back, it's 40 feet.
Okay. So let's go inside
Yeah.
and start the tour.
Okay.
It's a nice little study here.
Yeah, so here we are in what's called a pop-up once again, where we can serve cocktails and drinks up here when we have parties up on the deck.
Fantastic elevator.
There we are. Would you like to go down in the elevator or do you want to walk?
Why don't we walk? Because
Okay.
there's so much to see going down the steps.
Okay, follow me.
Well, you go first and I will.
Okay. So here we are. This takes us now to a new 2nd floor condo 2-bedroom apartment. This used to be a flat roof. There was nothing here. And we added this on.
I'm just showing the elevator and going up to where we're coming from. And you can see there are paintings everywhere around here.
The beauty of this is the space welcomes large paintings. There's room for major pieces, as you can see.
Yeah.
And this is all part of it. Turn on another light here. There we are.
It's an amazing space. Look at this. Paintings in your kitchen. I wish.
Well, that's the beauty of it, that we're able to do the various. Here's another little terrace here.
So that's terrace number 2.
Yeah. This is more intimate, but you can have a meal out here, as you can see. And there's a lovely tree, 100-year-old tree right in the heart of the city.
I mean, we're really in the heart of the city here. I mean,
Yeah.
people who are not familiar with Toronto should understand that this is very built up, and to have such a private space and to have all these terraces and that view is quite extraordinary.
It's lovely because, you know, here's a tree that's over 100 years old right in the heart of this. So this is a more intimate space. And then this takes us through the various. There's a master bedroom here with an ensuite. We can go through and see.
And I love the moose everywhere and the Canadian leaf everywhere. Incredible.
Yes, I did that blanket for the Hudson's Bay Company.
Oh, right, yes.
They did thousands of them, and they're all over the place.
And another one here.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
And then This takes us downstairs. There we go. That's called Leave It to Beavers. There they are. And because this is like my private museum, this is a little watercolor that I did in Paris when I was 19 years old, exactly 60 years ago. September of 1962 was my hotel room after I arrived.
Oh, wow.
Rue Linné, Hôtel du Labyrinthe, dans le quartier, près de la Sorbonne.
So what were you doing in Paris?
I was studying. That's where I learned how to speak French. J'ai pris ma troisième année dans l'histoire de l'art à l'Université de Toronto et puis je me suis inscrit à la Sorbonne. Heureusement, j'ai eu la chance d'apprendre la langue quand j'avais 19 ans. C'était beaucoup plus facile. We had to repeat phrases like j'ai été chez bébé tout l'été. Le cirque circule dans la rue de Rivoli.
I don't think that French people can pronounce these tongue twisters.
There you go. They would teach all the foreign students, depending on where you were from, what phrases to repeat in French. Pour les Allemands, for the Germans, it was les chaussettes de l'archiduchesse sont-elles sèches?
Et archi-sèche. I know that one.
Yeah. Voilà.
Were you already painting when you went to Paris?
Actually, no, I was studying art history, but I did my own work. I went to the Académie de la Grande Chaumière, Boulevard Montparnasse, and I did a lot of drawing there from models. So that was pretty exciting. And
so
there
this
we are.
is
But if you
another,
look around, you take a look up.
You can see, so we've come down another stair, another level
flight,
here,
yeah.
Another flight of stairs, and a lot of Canadian
there we go,
flags,
flags.
And maple
and then
leaf.
during the pandemic, I painted flowers. It kept me going for nearly 2 years. There's a snapdragon. And this is
the colors are incredible here. What do you paint with mostly?
Acrylic.
Acrylic.
And pastel.
Okay.
This is the catering kitchen, which we use for events whenever we had.
So I just want to, for those who don't know, this fantastically elegant lady.
She's une grande dame, vraiment. She's a lovely woman.
A wonderful lady, and her name is Liz Dalswell.
That's right.
And she is the Ontario Governor General.
Lieutenant Governor.
Lieutenant Governor. Yes. And she's an exquisite lady, and what a treat.
This is called Vice Regal. There she is with the noble beast.
There's so many of these paintings. So how many paintings a year do you create?
Oh, good heavens. I'm blessed because I have this energy level that keeps me going. And I did over 40 paintings of flowers in the 2 years.
In 2 years?
Yeah.
It's incredible. Yeah. It's amazing.
And then I was lucky enough to have grown up with Margaret Atwood. I met her when I was only 17. And this is a portrait I did of her in 1980.
Wow.
42 years ago.
That's amazing. And so maybe we're going to go to the main gallery and we can talk about the moose, because sure. I'm very, very intrigued about the moose.
Okay. Follow me. There we are. There you are.
Now look at this space here. This is incredible.
There we are. And this is
one of Charles Pachter's most illustrious book. He illustrated journals of Susanna Moody, written by Margaret Atwood.
This was back in 1980 again. It was Margaret's triumph. It was her most famous series of poems based upon the life of Susanna Moody, who was a British immigrant who came to live in Ontario in the wilderness in the 1830s and 40s. She wrote a book called Roughing It in the Bush, How to Survive in the Wilderness, and it was a bestseller in Britain. But Atwood took the original book and turned each chapter into one poem. And that's what this is. This is a livre de luxe, a folio d'artiste. And here we are. This will give you some idea.
That's amazing.
Yep. This is.
So who is this?
This was Susanna Moody. And this is from a daguerreotype. But all of this was my interpretation based on Margaret's poems.
It's incredible. What year did you do this?
1980.
1980.
And each poem, as I said, is the source of each poem was one chapter. And the chapter in the original book was 30 pages, reduced to one poem.
And is it printed in a non-luxury edition like that?
Yes.
That's the one that you just showed.
Edition that Martha.
Right.
This is the Livre de Luxe. This is a very expensive book that was only done in an edition of 120 copies. It sells for $10,000 a copy because there are 30 original prints.
Wow.
The printers we brought from Spain, and they worked for 9 months in Toronto doing the silk screens based on the poetry.
It's incredible.
There are copies of the book in the Victoria and Albert, in the Smithsonian in Washington, and the National Library. They're all over the world. But it was a special moment for us because, as I said, when Margaret sent me the poems, she was working in Boston in 1968, and I was at Expo 67. And the minute I read them, I knew that this was one of her finest moments. And I'm one of the few who can say in all frankness, despite her amazing successes with her novels, I truly believe that her poetry is her great strength. And ironically, the poetry is accessible, readable, and understandable, and fluid and melodious. Some of the more recent books are dystopic and hard to follow, but she has her fans in all areas. So I'm happy for her. This was a special moment for me because I met her at the right time and the right place.
Yeah, and you really connected with the poems.
Oh, yeah.
What was it that, for you, that connected you to these poems?
They were so comprehensible and so full of beautiful phrases and melodies. For example, this poem about this is about the cholera epidemic. And people coming to Canada in the 1840s. After we had crossed the long illness that was the ocean, we sailed upriver. On the first island, the immigrants threw off their clothes and danced like sandflies. We left behind one by one the cities rotting with cholera, one by one our civilized distinctions, and entered a large darkness. It was our own ignorance we entered. I have not come out yet. My brain gropes nervous tentacles in the night, sends out fears, hairy as bears, demands lamps, or waiting for my shadowy husband, hears malice in the trees' whispers. I refuse to look in a mirror. I need wolf's eyes to see the truth. Whether the wilderness is real or not depends on who lives there. The language is really, really brilliant.
It is.
Yeah. So that was what got me going, and it's become our most famous collaboration.
It's incredible.
It's been written about in many languages all over the world, etc. And of course, I've done several different paintings of Margaret over the years, and I'm thrilled to see how beloved she is by the literary world all over the planet. Yeah. I mean, she really is a phenomenon.
So let's talk about the moose now.
Yes. I grew up in the period of pop art. And when I was teaching in the University of Calgary in 1969, I happened to notice that almost all the Canadian art magazines featured stories by American pop artists. There was nothing about Canadian artists. It was the colonial mentality. If it came from elsewhere, it was consequential. If it came from here, who do you think you are? But because of that, and because I remember so much how Andy Warhol turned Marilyn Monroe and Elizabeth Taylor and Jackie Kennedy into subjects for his work, it wasn't until I started doing these pop images in Calgary back in the late 60s of cowgirls and Mounties that I came back to Toronto and I heard on the news that the Queen was coming to Niagara on the Lake in 1973 to open the new Shaw Festival Theatre. I happened to do, because I was, as a grassroots Canadian artist, I couldn't understand how come the head of state didn't live here. Who was this lady in London? And it was all about colonialism. Well, I went ahead, and this is long before Photoshop, I juxtaposed an image of the Queen trooping the color, as she used to do in Buckingham Palace on her horse. I put her on a moose instead. At the time, it caused a scandal.
Do you have it here?
Yes, it's over here. Let me show it to you. There she is. And when I did the image, my dealer at the time, who was famous for supporting contemporary Canadian artists, took one look at it and said, I don't have to show this and I don't have to tell you why. Well, I was shocked, but it happened to be a stroke of fate because I lived on a street called Shaw Street in downtown Toronto. And I decided to open the show at my own studio, and I called it the Other Shaw Festival. And I opened it the same day the Queen was in Niagara on the Lake. The painting made the press worldwide with filler in newspapers saying Canada in royal rage over Queen on Moose, monarchists threatened to slash canvases, artists warned to stay indoors. The whole thing was a silly hype, but overnight I became a Canadian Warhol. P.S. I never sold one painting. It was Canada. It wasn't until 6 years later that a woman named Lorraine Monk came to visit me in Toronto. She was from Ottawa, and she took one look at the painting. One that you just saw was a reproduction of the original painting. She took one look at the painting and she said, how much do you want for that? I said, $1,200. She said, I can't give you that. I said, oh, okay. How much are you giving me? She said, I'm going to give you $10,000. It's the most important piece of post-colonial pop art to have ever been created in Canada. That was Lorraine. And because of that, I dined out on the Royals all these years. This is called Crown Royal on the Rocks, a pun on the whiskey.
Yeah.
And there she was, a beautiful young woman. She was like 30 years old. And I painted her in a Canadian group of 7 setting. And this is one of the more recent ones from 2014 at her closet. And it's called Decisions, Decisions.
So you've got a wicked sense of humor.
Well, the French have a word for it. They call me espiègle, which means cheeky or nervy. And I've had fun dining out on the whole phenomenon of the monarchy within a Canadian context. I met the Queen in London back in 2015. And when I gave her a postcard of her on the moose, she actually chuckled and said, how amusing. She wasn't offended.
She had never seen it before, she must have.
She may well have, I don't know. But I mean, she was very sweet about it. She wasn't offended. She thought it was cute.
So how did you feel when she passed away?
It's interesting because I knew it was the end of an era. We all knew it was coming. I was only 9 years old when I watched the coronation back in 1952. It's hard to explain, but in many ways, despite the fact that I've only had the utmost respect for her and how hard she worked over the years, I do find the institution of monarchy for Canadians un peu périmé, a little bit old-fashioned, a little bit out of date. And I often wonder how we could change our mindset to have a head of state that lived here. Now we're going to have Charles and Camilla, and we have to figure out what that's all about.
Yeah.
But, you know, if I'm an avid historian and I go back to the years when Britain mercilessly conquered French Canada and the First Nations.
Yeah,
And what kill, conquer, rule is all about.
that's right.
It's
Yeah.
the nature of human behavior.
So we have some guests arriving, and it's going to get a little noisy here, but I would like to finish on the Canadian flag and on your incredible pride for
well, once again,
Canada.
you know, as I think I may have told you that I starred in a film at the Canadian National Exhibition at age 4, where I played a lost boy at the X, and I got the illusory impression at an early time in my life that Canada was glamorous. I watched all of this, and then 20 years later, I got lucky to work at Expo 67 in Montreal, where I will never forget how glamorous Canada was at that year. It was a spectacular year. In 1980, I realized, historian that I am, that the flag had just celebrated its 15th anniversary. It was 1965 when it was adopted in Parliament. And I had a farm up in Oromodanti Township, north of Barrie, and I stuck a flag on a pole in a fence post and watched it waving in the wind as the sun was setting. And I had an epiphany. I realized it was much more glamorous outdoors under the influence of wind and light, and I started to paint it.
So I'm here, I just want to tell the audience, I'm about, what, 40 feet from the flag here, would you say? And this flag is glowing. It's absolutely, and it's not a function of the light on it or anything. It is extraordinary.
Well, I have, my trade secret is I work with about 4 different shades of red.
All right.
Carmine red, deep red, bright red, cadmium red, middle. And I've learned how to manipulate that color in so many different ways.
Yeah, well, it's a fantastic result. Thank you so much, Charles. It's been a real privilege. Thank you so very much.